For the longest time now, I wanted to make some form of content about game collecting. At some point I referred to that hobby in some of my reviews, but only now I think I finally found an appropriate way to create such a content, and I've been given the equipment to put that hobby in a proper spotlight. Because when it comes to game collecting, there are many really insane and cool things to show off, and it deserves a proper spotlight. But I didn't want to just show off the things that I collected or simply do an unboxing. I want to talk more in depth about the objects themselves and the hobby in general, because on that end there is just a lot to talk about and criticize. But where to start? That is a question I asked myself a lot. Collecting games is a vast hobby, and in today's world a rather messy one as well. So I decided to keep it cliché and simple. Let's start at the very top of the game collecting iceberg by asking a simple question. What exactly is a collector's edition? See, I told you it's cliché and simple, and you might even think it's a very simple question to answer. You could say something like this is a collector's edition. It says it clearly on the front and even on the back. Its shown content is very suitable for what a collector's edition should be. It has the game, soundtrack, art book, and even some side goodies like a cloth map, training cards, and even a shirt. So there you have it, the answer to my question. This is a collector's edition, right? Well, if you would define a collector's edition with such traits, then how would you call this? On the box it says that it is a limited edition, but its content is fairly similar to the collector's edition I just showed. It has the game, art book, side goodies like these cool postcards, schematic print, and these military bonds, or whatever they need to be. Alright, it doesn't have the soundtrack like the other collector's edition, which is a shame because Destiny 2's music is quite good, but it does have instead a very nice fancy steel case. So what exactly does limited edition mean here? Limited in the amount of created copies? Well, possibly, but collector's editions and every other special edition also is created in a limited amount, so that reference is kinda pointless here. Maybe they meant the amount of content given in this version is limited compared to the collector's edition. Or maybe I'm just overthinking it. You know what? Let's grab something very simple. Yeah, that will help the case. Just something fairly simple. Here's another one. It's the Mass Effect 3 Collector's Edition. And well, the box is a little bit smaller than the previous ones, but it says Collector's Edition on the box instead of Limited Edition, so it must be a Collector's Edition. Let's see its content. A steel case, a little sleeve with bonus goodies like an art book, an N7 patch, frameable picture of the Normandy, and even a comic. I mean, there's good content in this box, but its content is again the same as the other two. You might now see what I am going at right now. If we approach the collecting hobby with the terms created and used by the industry itself, things get tricky and messy. And that is without the rest of the edition terms like Ultimate, Deluxe, Gold, Complete, and so on. The industry's terminology is all over the place, and that is where I want to start exploring the collecting hobby, by setting up a foundation which will make future exploration and discussions about it easier, as we get more grounds to understand each other and material to reference as we go further. Despite what the industry says, in my opinion, games get released into 3 different versions. The first one being the base game. It's very self-explanatory. It is the most standard version of the product. There are no add-ons to speak of, nothing special, and mostly contains a manual and the game itself. This term also applies on digital games, however, this is a video about collecting games, so of course I'm going to use the physical copies as examples. The second version is what I like to call the upgraded version. This version is basically the base game with some small added side bonuses. They usually come in unique packaging or a special box like a steel case, but do not come with large goodies. They are easily recognized by the special names like the Day 1 edition, or have game-related name editions like the Death edition of Dante's Inferno. This term is however very broad, as it's basically the term I give to describe every edition that is between the base game and the next version, which are the big boys, the ones that everyone knows, collector's editions. But in my sense of the term collector's editions. I use Collector's Edition as an overarching term for the top tier versions of a game you can buy, or any version that stands above the just discussed upgraded version. Even when the industry tries its best to squirt out multiple different versions of a game, giving them all different special sounding names like Ultimate, Deluxe, Gold, Completed, Limited, and of course Collector's Edition, I still all consider them one and the same, as just Collector's Editions. As they all play off the same idea, and that is being collectible. The most common Collector's Edition version contains a various amount of special goods and usually comes with one big gimmick, like a statue, a helmet, or a model of something. Now let's quickly return to my opening question, what is a Collector's Edition? But this time apply the three terms I just described. The Terra Collector's Edition is, as the name implies, a Collector's Edition, even by my definition. But so is the Destiny 2 Limited Edition, despite it also having a separate named Collector's Edition. Because the Limited Edition of Destiny 2 does more than just being an upgraded version of the base game. Here are some quick examples of upgraded versions for comparison, like the before mentioned Death Edition from Dante's Inferno, the Day 1 edition from Code Vein, and the Special Edition of Days Gone. Now, I also love these kind of editions. To be honest, I like to collect them more than collector's editions, as collector's editions are huge. But that's also the whole point and the most interesting fact about them, as they leave the biggest impact and impression on people and collectors. I mean, whenever I show people my Bridge Baby from Death Stranding, they will either call it cool or call me crazy for buying it and having it on display in my house. And they will call me crazy again when I tell them about the huge price tag and that I still think that it was worth every cent. Cause look at it, look how adorable. Ooh. Now, if you want to pay such a high price for a collector's edition is up for debate. But whatever you pay for it, at least the game itself is always included. Or, well, I would say that if we were living in the ideal world, cause lately a trend is slowly been creeping into the game industry that 200 plus euro collector's editions do not contain the game. Which creates a weird feeling, cause they claim they are selling you a collector's edition of a game, but then the game itself is not included. Yeah, that's not how the system should work, and definitely doesn't work for me. In my opinion, a game's collector's edition without the game physically included is not a collector's edition at all. If it's not physically present in it, then what is being sold is nothing more to me than simple merchandise that is trying to be sold on the hype of a game's release. God of War Ragnarok is one of the latest examples of this shitty business practice. It has a base game which, depending on the console, will set you back around 60 to 70 euros. Then it has a launch, aka upgraded edition, which is 80 euros, and then 2 collector's editions. The named collector's edition cost 215 euros, and the other, the Jötnar edition, cost 270 euros. Now, all the content in these editions is up for debate, as in my opinion it's rather uninspiring and boring. But my issue as a collector here is that the game is physically absent from both editions. It does come with a game, a digital version of that, which is a one-time use code and is only downloadable as long as it is available on the Sony servers. And yes, today the game is still downloadable, and it will be tomorrow and the day after that and weeks from now and even some years from now. But we all know too well how companies won't leave their servers running forever. From that point on, you can only rely on a physical copy of the game. And that's where the problem comes in, as the collector's edition does not have it. So in my honest opinion, the game is not included in either collector's editions. Meaning that if I want to fully collect this game and have a proper collector's edition, I gotta spend another 60 to 70 euros on top of the near 300 euros I have already spent. What is worse is that despite my view on this practice, I gotta say, thankfully the game is still included in these 2 collector's editions. Because unfortunately a more greedy practice is creeping into the game industry where collector's editions don't come with the game at all. not even digital. And while I can completely understand that some people do not agree with my view that a physical game has to be included in a collector's edition, I think we can all agree that a collector's edition without the game at all is not a collector's edition, but simply merchandise. And yet, even when the game is included, digital content still is present, which is another problem by itself. Gaming these days is heavily intertwined with the digital world, which offers many possibilities for gaming that were unthinkable only a couple of decades ago. But even in the age of digital, nothing lasts forever. It's therefore unfortunate that games and collector's editions in general incorporate more and more digital-only content. To me, digital content is not actual content that adds value or meaning to a collector's edition. Just like with day one DLC or pre-order digital bonuses, it are pieces of content cut from the base game and held hostage. It's then just used to play on your fears of missing out and the idea of exclusivity to drive you into paying more money for the same product. For collector's editions, I would argue it's worse that more and more of its content is digital only. As time progresses, collector's editions will end up eventually on the used market, and if you buy those, the digital content codes that come with them are definitely used. This devalues the collector's edition monetary-wise, but more importantly, content-wise, because in many cases, there's no other possible way to get that content as it's not sold separately. I bought my Mass Effect Collector's Editions all used, therefore I skipped out on some of its bonus content. For Mass Effect 3, for example, it was the Javik DLC. You can still buy this piece of DLC separately, but who knows if that's still available 10 years from now. The only bonus content that was actually accessible for me without depending on some online servers or extra charges was in the Mass Effect 1 Collector's Edition, as that bonus content was on a physical disc, giving me or anyone with the disc access to the bonus content. In other words, the physical disc stood the test of time while most digital content haven't and will not as time progresses. Because only in rare cases can you buy the digital content separately. Most of the time the content is just lost to time once all codes are used. Now, you might ask, what is the big deal here? Because usually the content are some in-game missions or some skins. And you're right, to most people, and even to myself, that kind of content is not special. But since recent years, a lot of content that I used to collect as a collector is being pushed in that same direction as that useless DLC. Soundtracks and artbooks are usually included in collector's editions, and these are great pieces of content to have and to collect, as they are basically more forms of media to approach the same game. Now, granted, some pay more attention and put more effort into those, while others take the complete piss at it. But lately, soundtracks and artbooks are being pushed into that same digital-only space as those pointless missions and skins. And it almost feels like they treat it as some kind of afterthought, which is a huge injustice for the many people that worked on the game, and a big waste in general, but it also devalues the collector's edition again, as this content also gets lost over time. Personally, I prefer to preserve such works in a physical way. It's nice to hold a book filled to the brim with great artworks, where you can see how the game you enjoyed got shaped, while at the same time inspire and enrich your own imagination. Whenever there is a soundtrack CD included with a collector's edition, I listen to it fully for a couple of days. And while you can listen to the same soundtrack on YouTube, an actual CD is an item that you can consider to be collectible, while a YouTube video definitely is not. The same can be said about art books. You can view art pieces online or in-game, but I appreciate its quality much more when able to view it printed in real life. But if both are released purely digital only, then the same rules apply. If the code is used for the digital download, someone else can't get it afterwards. And if you lose your account that the code is connected to, it also means that content is lost. Physical products can be damaged and lost as well, but your control over it, that it will not happen, is much higher. And ultimately is the biggest part of the reason why I collect games. Games are obviously a form of art that I really enjoy a lot, and I want access to it longer than a lifetime of a console generation or some servers. Because the reality of things is that many games of the past are not accessible digitally right now, and as time progresses, many will be delisted at some point in the future. The best solution in my opinion to this is buying my own physical copies of games and store them right, so I will not lose access to some of my favorite games, stories and memories. I could resort to piracy in the end when all things are lost. I mean, the frustrating truth is that pirates are doing a much better job at preserving games from the past than the actual industry. But experiencing games like that is to me not the same thing than opening a box and enjoying the contents that it contains. Going through items that feel like they are pulled from the games themselves, or browsing through art books, getting a sense of depth and creativity that was involved in making the games. In my opinion, those and other elements around games are also part of the gaming experience. And while piracy and digital gaming give me temporarily access to the games, it does not give me access to the experience I just described. And with that, I will conclude my basic terms and views on the collecting hobby. First and foremost, if you made it to the end of the video, thank you very much for sticking around. Cause I know, the bare basics and looking shortly at games and collector's editions is not the most interesting thing. But as I stated at the start, it just had to be done. But now with that done, we can start going into more details and nuance on specific topics of the hobby, or take a closer view on certain aspects, collectors and other editions of games. Some personal favorite topics I would like to discuss are steel cases, as they are my main focus in the collection. I also would like to discuss the ways you can collect games and how to collect games on a budget, cause don't let the size of my collection fool you. Most of them are used and bought with a limited budget. But yeah, those topics are for next time. Again, thank you very much for watching, and I hope I will see you next time when I talk again about collecting games.